distract you with stories of Embarc Collective. I appreciate the intro. The intro was fabulous because that is exactly what we do, and what I'm going to do in the time that I have with you is just give you a little bit more detail as to what we've been up to in our first true year of operations. We're a brand new organization. Just to do a time check, when do you want me to wrap up, just so that I don't?
Whatever works for you. We can leave some time for question and answers. Again, as you said, everybody's kind of on a schedule, so respective of their time, you talk till you feel you need to and get out your message, and then we'll take some questions, which I'm sure we'll have a few.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, and what I'll do is I have prepared a couple of slides. So I'm going to share my screen just so that you guys can see them. So are you able to see the slides?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Because right now, because of my Zoom configuration, I no longer can see you guys. So we'll make it work. And I have multiple monitors. So if you see like me do what I'm about to do, which is try to get my mouse to the other monitor so I can rotate slides, that's the reason why. It's the beauty of tech. Awesome. So I am going to just give you a quick overview of what we're up to at Embarc Collective. I want to make sure that this is interactive, so feel free to pepper in questions as you have them. And hopefully I'll answer your questions along the way, but if you're finding I'm not answering them, definitely go ahead and ask, and I'll give you a heads up if I'm prepared to chat about that specific question in the later part of the talk. So just as a quick intro about me, the best way to describe me is just a byproduct of a scientist and a librarian. And what that means is if those are your parents, you're doomed to be a nerd. And that's exactly what I am. So I love the world of tech startups, really because these companies are building something brand new every single day. The problems that they are solving, there isn't an existing solution for what they're building. And so everything is new, everything is undiscovered, and that's a really fun place to play. And so that's how I found myself in this world, which is a fairly new world in the world of startup support. But I'm excited to be here. So just to reinforce what was shared during the introduction. So what are we solving at Embarc Collective? And this gives you, I'll talk about the problem, and it'll give you a context as to what Jeff Finnick was talking about when he was thinking about what type of model do we need to bring to Tampa Bay to solve the problem, which is that we need to make sure that Tampa Bay is seen as a premier place to build a business. And I know that many of you on this call are experiencing the benefits of the, why it makes sense to build a business here in this region, but it's not known, and we haven't built that brand and don't have enough of the proof points to really attract even more of an audience and get the attention of even more of an audience. And the fact of the matter is we're just not standing out. I think there's a lot of cities of our size that we are competing with, and it is really tricky to be able to stand out. And there's a whole slew of reasons why. There's a whole slew of different opportunities beyond creating a brand for ourselves. There's tactical things like just making sure that we are increasing access to education for people in the region, and that's the metric is typically associated with that, which is very debatable, is the percentage of bachelor degrees in the region. If you look at startups in the region, we see a less volume and smaller deal sizes than other metros of our size, and we have a very diversified business sector. So there's not a singular industry that's really defining the region, and therefore defining what new technologies are coming out of the region. And so what I see in this problem of hey, we're not standing out as this top place to build a business as a great opportunity. And there's a lot of different ways to address the problem at hand, and there's not one silver bullet that's going to solve for it, but a solution is something like what we're building with Embarc Collective, which is an innovation hub or a startup hub. And the reason why is because it helps to address three things that the problem has outlined. One, it helps to address challenges with talent. So we talked about, we're not standing out. We're not necessarily attracting the talent and retaining the talent that we need to here. And something like an innovation hub is really important in guiding existing startups towards growth and retaining existing businesses and talent, because they're seeing more opportunities here. And because of that, that starts to generate buzz, and so you're able to start to attract new startups to the area, which is really exciting. We're actually starting to see that already. From a funding perspective, I talked about how the startups here are underfunded, and making sure that we are able to demonstrate to key customers from a revenue perspective or investors from a funding perspective that there are companies to invest in, and making sure that we're level setting those companies that are here to be competitive with any deal that an investor is seeing from across the world. And so they're not discounting the fact that they're from a smaller geography. In fact, they're saying like, no, this company could compete with anybody that we're looking at. And then creating that distinct business sector identity, and increasing the awareness of Tampa Bay as a startup scene, and helping us form more of a distinct regional identity. So this is all very theoretical in terms of, this is what when I moved down here in 2018, this is what I was really immersed in, is understanding what are we trying to solve? Because when I was recruited here, it was under the premise of we need a startup hub to be able to put Tampa Bay on the map as a great place to build a company. And in doing that, that initial set of research, understanding that the reason why we need to build, the real reason why we need to build that startup hub is so that we can improve opportunities for the talent here, the funding opportunities, and really creating an identity for ourselves. So that is how Embarc Collective, that's sort of the thesis of Embarc Collective, and the organization that subsequently came about, once we had done that initial set of research and figured out what do we really need to build to solve a challenge that isn't already being solved in our region. So Embarc Collective, quite simply, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help Tampa Bay startups grow. And that is, we're a very intense and intentional organization with that focus. In our mission statement, which was set a little bit earlier, we help Tampa Bay startups build bold, thriving, scalable companies. It's another way of saying we help companies grow. And how do we know that we've achieved this very sort of, I wouldn't say it's aspirational because we're doing it already, but it's a bold ambition, is really when we are being seen as a geography that is being highly sought after by new ventures, existing ventures, as a great place to build. So really, essentially, it's just solving that problem that I mentioned 2 slides ago. And I'm interspersing in my slides images of Embarc Collective. So even though you guys aren't here right now, you get a feel for what we're up to. So there's lots of different models for building company or building startup support, and you all may be familiar with a bunch of them, but I want to just be able to describe just a little bit about how we're different and where our focus is. So, our mission is really essentially we're helping startups grow. How do we achieve that? And what I really pride ourselves on is that we invest quite a bit in startup coaching. And this startup coaching looks very different than anything else you'll find around the country. Traditionally, in startup support organizations, the support is actually coming from a slew of volunteers. So well-intentioned individuals with great experience that want to give back to their community by supporting new ventures coming out. And while it is great in theory, I experienced this in my last organization. It's really tough in practice, and it's tough because essentially a support organization, what they offer is support, a startup support organization. They offer support. But if you are delegating the support or the product that you're offering to volunteers, you really have no control of what your organization is doing. So in my last organization in Chicago, we had about 600 volunteer mentors, all of which were amazing, all of which were highly credible. I had zero clue as to what was happening between the startups we were supporting and the mentors that we were bringing on. And that's a real problem for an organization. If you don't know what support is occurring, you really have no idea what's happening inside of your organization. So I brought all that support in-house. So all of the guidance that startups are given are actually, it's given by a team of staff members. So I've hired a bench of startup operators, and they are the ones that provide the support to our companies. And for me as an organization, what that provides is accountability. When you're paid to do something, you're going to do it. It creates consistency, because when you're paid to do something, you're going to do it over and over again as needed. And it also gives me transparency. So I have an understanding of every interaction a coach has with a startup that we support. And what that allows is for coach conversations to stack on top of each other, because we know what all the previous conversations were. And so it ensures that there's a level of focus, and that the work that we are doing aligns with the goals of the company in a very linear way, rather than saying, one person saying, have you thought about this? And another person saying, have you thought about that? It creates sort of a streamlined structure to support. So while it's easy to pass over, it is the core differentiator of this organization, and what makes us different than any other support organization in the country. There isn't another support organization that has brought support in-house, but I suspect we'll start to see organizations copy our model. The other two differentiators I want to call out is that we take a really far-reaching approach to bringing investors and customers to the startups here. I subscribe to a philosophy that you don't need local capital to grow locally, and more venture funds are becoming more comfortable, especially in the time of the pandemic, with making investments outside of their geography. And we at Embarc Collective have a network of about 120 or so early stage funds from around the country. And when startups are ready and are sort of proven themselves to be ready to have these conversations, we make introductions to the funds that we have relationships with the idea that we will be able to ensure those funds know something is interesting is happening in Tampa Bay, but also making sure that we are increasing access to capital for the startups. And that's been a really successful model for us. And one that I think is really important. So I always tell the companies that we work with that we're not going to bring you the best of what's in Tampa Bay. We're just going to bring you the best, period. And we really don't see geography as a limitation for us. Prior to the pandemic, we would fly people in all the time to meet with companies. And now with the pandemic, there's just a much more willingness to be virtual. So it's actually worked in our favor in terms of access to key individuals or key organizations that our startups need to leverage. The last differentiator is that we've got this physical community for our startup population. And this is really important for a lot of reasons. I don't think of it as place. I think of it as community. So it's 32,000 square feet of community here. And we're supporting about 55 early stage companies right now. And having a sense of place and knowing where to find other people who are in your same stage of development is so important because it creates it creates a set of peers. It creates efficiency when you're trying to solve a problem that likely somebody else in the building has dealt with. And it also creates a tremendous access. The other things that having that physicality of our community provides is what I call visual density. So 2 weeks ago, there's a startup in New York that is thinking about moving its headquarters down to this region. It's a really big deal if that goes through. And bringing them to Embarc Collective, what they see is an early, they're sort of a late stage startup. What they see is a population of people who are like-minded to them, that are familiar with the tech startup world and are doing it themselves. They also see individuals that symbolize to them amazing talent opportunities. And if I'm bringing somebody who's thinking about joining a startup to a place like Embarc Collective, they see that if it doesn't work out with the startup that they are considering joining, which is often the case in the world of startups, they've got this visual safety net of 54 other companies that they could go work for instead. And so it creates a sense of confidence and comfort when you're trying to sell somebody on not only moving to a startup, but moving to a startup in Tampa Bay. And so that we really need that visual density to make the full sale to somebody on why they should join a team here. And it's amazing how powerful it is to actually see it all happening in one place. So that's another reason why having that physicality of our community, why that's so important. Let me stop here. I'm going to get into sort of what a day in the life is, and how our business model works shortly after. But let me see if you guys have any questions before I go on.
I have a quick question, just to understand. You had mentioned 55 startups that you're currently working with. Is that a lot, a little? And then the second part to that question is, could you define what these startups are, or is there a definition as far as what types of businesses they are? I assume we probably all think technology and those types of businesses, but is there a range of types of startups that you are dealing with?
Yeah, let me answer that second question first. It's a really great question, and I should have started with that. So the way that we define a startup is really about the ability to grow. So the way we differentiate a small business versus a startup is sort of how geography plays a role in the business. And so for better or worse, and you may disagree with this definition, but we think of small business as a business that is serving the geography that it sits inside of. And when for a startup, we think that it has exponential growth because geography is not a constraint for them and their growth. And oftentimes it's not a constraint because of the use of technology. So we support technology products themselves. So let's say a software product, or technology enabled businesses. An example of that would be we are working with a new bra company that will only sell online. So they're not going to be focused on getting into brick and mortar retailers. Instead, they'll go direct to consumer. And that is a technology enabled business. And has the ability to scale and sell anywhere in the world. And so hopefully that answers the second question. With regards to the first question, 55. So my goal for year one of real operations is for us to be serving 65 companies and then continue to grow, basically double our growth every year. Now, with regards to, is that a lot or a little? Our region does not have a lot of startups. We're pretty nascent in our startup development. There's about 300 startups in Tampa Bay. And just to give you comparison, in the organization that I used to work at, we as a single organization used to serve 500 startups in Chicago. And that was only a small fraction of the number of startups that were in the city itself. So it's small for it's small in terms of where my aspiration is. It is a good size percentage of the number of startups that we have in the region, and my goal, and you know, for this really to work, we have to increase the number of startups that are in our region for this to work. And so my thought is that, you know, by creating the community and by creating the resources and support so a company can get off the ground, we are encouraging the development of new startups, and we're the place to go when you're just starting out. So I'm hopeful that we'll remedy that issue. I'll keep going. So even showing you images and telling you about what's going on, I still find it to be oftentimes very theoretical of what actually happens at Embarc Collective. So I took a stab at just giving you a sense of, like, if you're a startup member, what might your day look like if you're here at Embarc Collective? And what you'll find is that your day is mixed with building your business and learning about how to build your business all in one day, all in one place. And the way that I subdivide it is the ability to build, learn, and collaborate. So you might, you know, you're running your business. So you might do your weekly check-in with your development team. You might have a sales meeting. You've got to catch up on emails. You can do all of that within Embarc Collective. You might catch up on your emails in our quiet room. You may have a sales meeting in our big boardroom, and you might do your weekly check-in with your development team, who may be based here, may be based somewhere else, on Zoom in your office. And then learning, we're an education nonprofit. It is a key part of what happens here. So you may join a group session. We do weekly sessions, group style, for members on a specific topic that has come up frequently in coaching conversations. So a great example is around equity compensation. I coach about 15 companies of the 55 that we're serving, and about half of them had questions about equity compensation in the same week. That's a trigger to us that we need to host a session for them, and bringing in the best person we have in our network to guide them around equity compensation. So that happened a couple of weeks ago. So you might attend that. You might have your weekly session with your Embarc Collective account manager. That could be me, that could be another member of our team, about just what's happening in the business so that we can figure out where to best support the company in where they are that week. And you might grab a framework. I mentioned a customer success framework in our repository of resources. So it's not just in person, it's not just programmatic. There's also a ton of other resources that we vet and make sure that we're getting the best possible framework, guides, whatever it is, for the companies that we're serving. And then the last piece is around collaboration. So you might do a team whiteboarding session in a day about your 2021 goals. You might run into another member in our member kitchen and get an accountant recommendation. A lot of those passings of, hey, who's your lawyer? Who's your accountant? Which graphic designer do you use? All of that happens in sort of the proverbial water cooler. And then, you know, if it's a Thursday, you might attend our member social. So it looks a little bit different now in a pandemic, and meet some of the new companies at Embarc Collective, because you'll see that there's so much synergy that happens between companies. It's not just between the coaching staff and the companies, it's between the companies as well. And that's really the community coming to life. just giving you a sense of who we're serving. So this isn't even all of the logos of the companies that we're serving, but we're up to 55 companies, and they join us on a regular basis. So this week we had 2 new member companies join us, and we have an application process for them that really evaluates them on the scalability of their business. We want to make sure that they have really high growth potential in the business that they're building, viability in their business. We want to make sure that the business model itself is viable, and then coachability. I mentioned that coaching is such a core part of what our team is doing. And if a founder or the lead of the team is not coachable, we do not make money on I'll explain the business model in a second, but it doesn't do me any good to invest resources into somebody that doesn't want to accept that coaching. And so that's a really important part of our vetting process. But you don't have to have everything figured out to be a part of Embarc Collective. And in fact, we don't want you to. We want to be with you as you're figuring it out. You don't need to come to us and say, like, it's very different than coming to somebody for an investor conversation where you have to have everything buttoned up and you have to know the answers to everything. I say to companies, we want to see the blemishes. We want to make sure that we are getting under the hood and really helping you figure things out. And the whole reason why we exist is to help you in that process. And just to touch on our business model, I referenced that before. So we're a 501c3 education nonprofit. Companies pay a very nominal fee to be a part of Embarc Collective. In a normal year, it's about a quarter of our operating expenses. In the time of COVID, we've offered a lot of relief to the companies we're serving. So I checked this morning, it's about 11% of our total operating expenses. So we really are trying to make this very, very accessible for early stage companies. We have several event spaces throughout Embarc Collective, so that's another source of revenue in a non-pandemic time, around being able to host different events. We call ourselves Embarc Collective. The idea of collective is that we want to bring people in, whether they're a member or a community partner. The only mandate is that the event needs to be about entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, or business to match the goals of our education nonprofit. We have corporate memberships for 10 larger enterprises, and so that they pay to be a part of the Embarc Collective community, and that's a really important stakeholder for us, as well as grants from private and corporate foundations. And then we have a group of individuals that are a part of our what we call our founders circle, and they have really invested in the long-term viability of the organization. So knowing that the member fees are such a small part of what we do, having access and building the relationships with all of these other organizations. And if you know of more, I'll gladly take it, especially in the year of a pandemic where financial expectations are not what you expected. I gladly take any references from that standpoint. And on the topic of a pandemic, people often ask, how have you navigated COVID-19? And I do think that we've been pretty lucky as we have worked through it. So we, like many organizations, we closed our space in March. And we started working with companies in 2019, but our space didn't open until January of 2020. So we actually operated in very much a pandemic way during 2019. So we just moved all of our coaching and programming to be virtual like it was last year. That's just dumb luck. I definitely didn't plan that to happen that way, but it allowed us to be pretty nimble and having to navigate with what the pandemic threw at us. And we reopened on June 8th with really new protocols in place to ensure that we were keeping this community safe. And so the space, the way we operate in the space as a community is pretty different than it was pre-pandemic, but we're making it work. I invested in a lot of new facility upgrades in an already new facility, and making sure that we were making the space just more touchless and limiting the interactions that people could have with each other, and anything regarding airflow, really making sure that we have top of the line from that standpoint. And then I mentioned that we have events around entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, and business here. We moved to what we call hybrid events. So you might have 10 people in our event space as what we call a studio audience, and the rest of your audience is virtual. And that's something that we know will be a part of our lives for at least, 6 more months or so. So it's been a really fun thing to build as a new offering for this community. And you're all welcome to take advantage of it. So I'll end with just how to get involved. So our focus is on startups. So in terms of startup opportunities, individual startups are oftentimes looking for advisors as they build their advisory board. And we're always looking for we have a member of our staff who's focused on talent strategy for our startups. And oftentimes she's helping them build advisory boards. So on our jobs page, we actually have a submission for people who are interested in being advisors to startups. And when we find a match between a startup need and your expertise, we can make that connection. Investing in startups, and I'm really excited that in the middle of this month, and we're already in November, we'll be hosting something called the Glaring Gap Summit, which is a training for 50 women on how to get involved in startup investing. And it is very intensive training, but my goal is that coming out of this, we have 50 new investors in the state of Florida. And so if you're interested in that, I've included my email address, and that's focused on women, 3 groups of women actually: college women who are interested in a venture capital career, mid-career women who know that later down the line, once they're accredited, they might want to be involved in startup investing, and then already accredited investors who may have yet to have done a startup investment, but want to get the skill set to be able to do so at some point soon. And then finally, just advocates for our startups. So we are always looking for opportunities for member startups, whether it's customer opportunities, investor opportunities, talent opportunities. If you know of somebody that is looking for a new job opportunity, send them to our jobs page to submit their resume. We always want to be able to connect our startups with the best talent possible. And then for Embarc Collective, just helping us build our brand. We're a new organization, and it is so challenging where the nuances of startup support are so nuanced that it's oftentimes hard for somebody who's so entrenched in the everyday of it to be able to pull my head back and say, to announce to the public, like, this is exactly what we're doing. And it's honestly because we're so focused on supporting companies. We don't have time to tell our own story. So we rely on people like you to help us tell our story. Introduce us to new startups. So if you are aware of a brand new startup, let us know. We'd love to bring them in as a startup member. And obviously we're a 501c3, so I'd be remiss to not say be a sponsor. But those are all, I believe those are all of my slides. I'll stop the share just to see if there's any other questions I can answer.
Yeah. Well, I have a bunch, but I don't want to hog the whole floor. I think what you've given us is just tremendous. I'm sure there are people on there. I'll ask this question if I could. Sure. When you say startup, could it be an existing company that maybe isn't technologically based, or that type of an arena that may want to delve into that? Is that fit in your model or no?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. So I call that, it's probably not the most accurate term, but I call it a corporate startup. And an example is, you may be familiar with the Metro Development Company. They did the Crystal Lagoon, amongst other things. They have built out an internal startup within their organization. So this is a real estate company, but they saw this opportunity to build a technology product, and their team actually sits at Embarc Collective. We treat them like a regular startup, even though their funding sources are different. And when I was in Chicago, I did that with corporations, big and small, all the time. And I'm really anxious to start to get more organizations in Tampa Bay to start building their new tests or new experiments out of Embarc Collective. An example from Chicago is Procter and Gamble, huge company. They wanted to build out a software platform that was associated with the Tide brand, because they were seeing that millennials didn't do laundry. They were sending it out and I was like, I don't know who those millennials are. I do laundry all the time, but they were. It was interesting because they sent a team to my old organization, which was 1871. That was the name of it, and to build, because they didn't want to get it swallowed by headquarters or the corporate office. They wanted the team to be able to be really nimble and get really inspired by working around other startups. So if you know of opportunities like that, I'd love to talk to folks on that conversation.
Great. Feel free to unmute. I'm sure some of our, by the way, it's okay. I recorded this because I know that there are a lot of trustee members and board members that would love to share or learn about this, if that's okay.
I'm always looking for advocates, so it's great.
Good.
Thank
you. Good. Questions? I see Al Braithwaite. He's Oldsmar City Manager.
She knows that. Anyway,
old friend.
Shenoy, a couple things crossed my mind as you were speaking. One is kind of a technical question, I guess. I cheated a little and looked at your partners list, and I saw Florida Funders is on it. Is there a template, checklist, or kind of a criteria that you use in deciding who or when to refer a potential startup to Florida Funders? And the reason I'm asking that is one of my former players is in seed funders, and they're kind of the JV version, mostly St. Pete guys. Yeah. And if you weren't already connected to them, I would push that and I would communicate that to them. But what can you give us a little on how you go about that process? That's very interesting to me. I know Mr. Vinnick is funded a lot, but I'm assuming you refer a lot of other things.
For sure. And Seed Funders is a great partner. They're on our investor list, and we have had several companies from Embarc Collective who have received investment from them. But just to give you a sense of sort of the process that we put companies through before we make an introduction, and this goes for any investor introduction. So just to give you context of why the 120 or so relationships, those have been cultivated by my team. And so when we make an introduction, it's not only reflecting the company that we're introducing, it's also reflecting ourselves. So that's why we have such stringent requirements before we make the introduction. But what we do with the company is typically the collateral that you need to be able to have a conversation with an investor is a pitch deck, which outlines, what's the opportunity, as well as if you get further along in conversations, you need to make sure you have your pro forma financials ready to go. In addition, if you keep going into diligence with the company or with the fund, they're going to ask you for what's called a data room. And essentially, it's going to be like every document regarding the management of your company. So any board meeting minutes, the incorporation documents, a cap table, any brand collateral, all of that they're going to end up asking for if you proceed in the process. So before we make the introduction, we actually make sure that every company has that ready to go. And I personally review all of that because it's so important. It's the Embarc Collective brand. And if we're sending a company that is just not prepared, that reflects poorly on us. So that's what we do. In addition, we will, for companies, we'll actually do a mock investor meeting with them. And we'll bring 3 of our coaches in to go through the process to make sure that companies not only are ready on paper, but are ready in person to be able to dive into very specific questions about their business. So that goes for preparation across the board for any investor meeting. And I'm really pleased to say that, it's not we're not 100% in terms of the intro to close, to getting the investment. but we have a really high percentage of companies that are very well prepared. And if they're turned down, they're not turned down because they don't have a strong business and they're not prepared. They're turned down for another reason. Maybe there's a conflict in the portfolio, or they're too early for that fund, but the fund wants to stay in touch with them as the company grows. So I feel really excited about that.
That's fascinating stuff. And I guess I should have figured you definitely have skin in that game. If I could, I just want to ask you one other quick one. We're navigating, as you know, from our last meeting, through development challenges and decisions, partially because of COVID. I kind of wonder what the future of business travel is going to look like. And I guess looking at the collaboration spaces that I've seen, I wonder the same thing. Do you think the demand for the actual space, because I know we kind of pitched you guys on us having a space here as a supplement or a good spot to be in, considering your presence in Tampa and Station House at St. Pete and the Voice and the Wave and those other places. Do you think the demand for physical space is going to be as big as we hoped originally as this goes beyond infancy? Because I think it may color our thinking as to what to do with the spaces we're trying to develop.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and obviously one that I've thought about quite a bit. You don't really prepare. I guess most corporations do include pandemic in their risk factors and their 10Ks, but it's not something you're thinking about all the time. So the answer is yes, and it's a different reason. It might be a different reason than what you're expecting. So building a startup is a very lonely endeavor. And so if you are doing it alone, it reinforces just how on your own you are as you're building. The mental health benefit of being in a physical community, just knowing that you're around other people, even if you have to socially distance and wear a mask around them, it was amazing to see the shift of people's mental wellness between the time we were closed and between the time we were reopened. And right now we have about 60 people on site on a given day. That's about half of our population. And so I think what I've learned is that you have to have that physical place to be able to create that sense of place. It's so important for different reasons. One, I mentioned you need to feel like you're not alone. Two, it creates a sense of place for the entrepreneur. Building a startup is 24/7, but if you can start to compartmentalize so that you can build at Embarc Collective and then try your best to go home and be a normal human being, which is really hard. It's really hard because all you're thinking about is your company. It helps people sort of balance the stress of building a company. It also is tremendously efficient. I mean, we had a PBS film crew through our space last Thursday for a national program that they'll broadcast in February. And I was able to get every startup that was on site into the footage. That is free branding for them. And so, there is still a value in place. And what it's taught me is that we do need to create flexibility. We have to create other options, because whether it's because you have kids at home or because, whatever it is, you got a condition that you have to stay at home or whatever it might be. We can't assume that everyone can always come to be on site, but we're seeing that there just are better benefits if you can be here.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm the child of a librarian and an engineer. What does that make me?
Oh, wow. We're twins.
Yeah. Doug, you want to take a shot at that one? I just threw you a softball.
No, that was way too easy.
Super nerd? What?
Yeah. Amy, you got any questions? You're full of technology at Nielsen.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really have any questions, just comments. I'm so intrigued by your operation and so excited that you're here. A belated welcome. You've been here 2 years now?
It'll be 3 in February, but time flies.
Oh my goodness. I literally thought it was last year and now it's almost 3 or what have you. So welcome to Tampa Bay. Remind me, where did you come here from?
I came here from Chicago.
Chicago. Okay, I read about it.
Yeah.
I guess it was 3 years ago that I read about it. Wow, I don't know where that time has gone. Well, when we open up our operation, I say reopen our operation at Nielsen, we'd love to have you over. Will Miller is the best tour guide ever, and he's not just on this call, and that's not the reason why I'm saying that, but we'd love to have you come over to Nielsen. I loved your story about Procter & Gamble. That's the kind of interesting way that, you know, I would have never thought you all were involved in that kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
Fascinated by the fact that millennials, you know, might need to buy more Tide or aren't buying any, so therefore
Yeah.
it's a problem, right?
It's I mean, that's why the corporate members are the companies that, so the head of, they exhibit this mentality that the head of fabric care innovation said to me, now this has got to be like 4 or 5 years ago, from Procter & Gamble. He said, we want to cannibalize ourselves before anybody else can. And that was the mindset of why they developed a service offering. Essentially, it was a laundry service offering, white labeling some existing technologies, slapping the Tide brand on it to create that connection with a user base that was not buying detergent. And that's the mindset that I want to engage with, is organizations that feel that same sorts of paranoia. They might be the market leader, but it's only a matter of one good idea and execution before they're not. And so trying to find more organizations like that and bringing those corporates into this orbit.
Interesting. Is that possibly, and maybe I missed the whole context of it, but is that where the Tide, I looked at a franchise, a Tide, is that part of how that all developed in that relationship, the Tide franchising laundry facility or whatever you want to call it?
So that, so the laundry piece of the dry cleaning franchise, that was the startup. And I think it's now been incorporated into the dry cleaning franchise. But the software that they worked on, it was being able to do the laundry, pick up, deliver, everything, all of the logistics around it. And it's in several markets. And I think now they were able to sort of like bundle the offering. So you may have more information from the franchise piece of it, because I'm not sure how it all ties together.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Jerry, guilty. Go ahead, Jerry.
My question is, am I unmuted? Yeah. My question is, do you work with large membership-based organizations?
In what way?
In helping them grow. In other words, like the chamber is a membership-based type organization.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's been my experience with membership-based type organizations that it's difficult to keep membership up because the younger people don't see value in membership.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if you have some history with participating with a large or small membership-based type organization.
So our experience is that we've got many of these membership organizations. I'll use an example like Tampa Bay Tech, as the membership organization for larger technology organizations in the region. We partner with them, so we try to collaborate on whether it's events or other programming with those types of organizations. It's an interesting question on that the broader issue of how can these, whether they're 501c6s, how do they sustain, given the I would say that like the virtualness of them makes it a little bit, or the virtual factor makes in-person membership organizations harder to sustain now, but not impossible. So
Right.
it's an interesting challenge. But the answer is no, not directly yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe can I, because was thinking of this, Jerry, I don't know if this is the direction you were going with this, but the thought is how do we help Embarc Collective grow, and how do we as a chamber and even collaborating with the city use that to our business community's advantage to be that conduit between, be it our chamber and new chamber members and Embarc Collective, and as a value to our chamber members of, you know, one of the many things in our toolbox to maybe direct them. Is that kind of?
Yeah, multiple things. Not only the chamber and where we are with the city, as well as another organization I'm deeply involved with. So I've got two separate membership-based nonprofit organizations. Both are, I think, in the middle of struggling with a long-term growth strategy with members.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at the traditional 60-year-old organization that has relied on membership dues as its one of its key sources of revenue, and now we talk about new norm, and we talk about virtual, and we talk about, will we really be able to get together physically someday soon, or someday anytime?
Yeah.
And all those things to me add up to, if we don't make some significant strategic direction decisions today for our long-term future, we may not have a long-term future.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and to kind of jump on what Amy said, you know, you've been here 3 years and we're just now learning about it. Holy cow. And the kind of thing you're doing with startups sounds like to me, I'm very intrigued with that. It sounds like to me the kind of opportunity for lots of organizations.
Yeah.
I'm worried about sustainability in these membership-based organizations, quite frankly.
Yeah. I think that a lot of business models are getting tested. It's very much stress tested right now. So I think your worry is right, is right now. You're like me. You operate in sort of a constant paranoia. You must be an entrepreneur. So,
Well,
yeah.
and the other thing is that you know, when you speak of tradition, I have experienced 60 years of tradition, and now looking forward, I think we need some significant change for tradition to carry on.
Absolutely. And figuring out what parts of tradition continue in a new way of being, a new, more sustainable way of being.
Right. And the other organization I'm active in, it's a worldwide organization, and its strength has been the passion of its its members for
Yeah.
what the organization's about. And now as that organization changes that value proposition, memberships are diminishing, and the old timers are like leaving in disgust. And so there's all kinds of new issues that, and I'll leave it positively. There's no reason why these organizations can't flourish in the new norm.
Yeah. 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 It's, I always say there's no dearth of problems for us to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate that concern, because, you know, it's, um, all organizations, especially this year, have been really had to hold a mirror up to their business model to say, like, is this working? Is this going to work in the short term? Can this work? Like, we'll never be back to what normal was. Will it work in whatever version of the future we end up with? Who knows? And so, yeah, it is a real challenge.
Thank you.
And I think one of the things that I've taken away from this, and I'll get with Al and Mayor Seidel our membership. But I think we constantly, within our city footprint and our chamber footprint, we're constantly getting new businesses. And I think for me personally, to educate myself on Embarc Collective and how I need to be able to talk intelligently about it, but to be able to give them a little bit of guidance, as a chamber to how they might be able to grow their business, or they're thinking about starting up or what have you. I think that's something that certainly we as a chamber can offer to our membership. And to Jerry's point, I think that adds value to our entire toolbox of what we do. I think we're one of the best chambers, and I'm not saying that because we're here. I think we're one of the best chambers in the Tampa Bay area and a great resource for a lot of different reasons. And I think being able to direct them to you, I think is great. What is your, what would you say, two things. What is your age kind of cross section of your 55 startups, and how long are they typically with you? I guess that's probably up to them.
Yeah, so on the second half of the question, it's up to them. So they join us when they're ready, they leave us when they're ready. I'm proud to say that we have 90% month over month retention, and that's because we adapt with the companies that we're serving. And then in terms of the age demographic, probably our youngest member, I have the data somewhere, but it's early 20s, and our most senior member is in his 60s. And probably average age is in late 30s. You'll see that we don't have, it's not sort of the young Zuckerbergs that are at Embarc Collective. It's typically people who have been in industry, have got really great industry expertise. They've realized there's something about their industry that really frustrates them, and they want to go out and solve it. And so they're coming in with the mindset of understanding their consumer, and where they need the help is on building the product, building the business. And so that ends up being a really great fit for us.
That's perfect. That's because I would think, I'm older. I just had a birthday yesterday, but sometimes you feel intimidated by these type of atmospheres that you're going to walk in and, you're going to be the old fart in the room unless Al walks in. But, I'm just kidding. But that's great. And any other questions in the room? I know we got Robin from Microlumen. That's another great chamber partner with us. And I think part of the problem is just, finding pipelines of help. That's the one thing that we have constantly run into, and it runs the gamut of our businesses. We're a pretty heavy manufacturing area up here, so we've always worked on that. But I think pipelines of help are really difficult. And I have found that even when I was mayor and went to some of the things, just because you're young and you have an Instagram account or a Facebook page, you are not technically savvy. You know how to work Facebook and Instagram, but and that's what we're hearing from some of the employers, that they think, wow, I'm super smart because I know how to work Instagram and TikTok and things like that. But they're not really trained in what they need to be trained in. So
yeah, absolutely. And if we can increase the amount of technical training here, hopefully next year we have a partner who is launching a full stack development boot camp here, and it'll be hosted out of Embarc Collective. They're a program out of Atlanta and Houston, and they're scaling to Tampa. And we need more of that. We need more of the non-traditional training opportunities so that people can get upskilled however they need to get really amazing job opportunities.
Awesome.
Right.
Any other questions or closing thoughts? I think you've kind of given us some ideas of how we can help, advisors and share that, I guess, with our chambers as to, I think sometimes people don't realize the skill sets that they have that they can share with, young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general. Investing, I don't know how that is. That typically, like, and I'll just use the Shark Tank method. Is that how that works? Is there some agreement with the investment component of it that, they get a piece of whatever it is that they're part of? Is that fair to say? Or
if you So oftentimes there's investment from the individuals, and we call that angel investing, and then there's investment coming from the funds.
Right.
All of those are going to be equity investments, so the company will give up a percentage of the company in ownership for the cash investment. And then there at the early stage for angel investors, there's typically pretty standard terms. We don't typically do any pitch competitions or things like that. Honestly, the way that investments work, the real way it works is that a person is on one side of the table and has a conversation with a person on the other side of the table. And it's two individuals seeing if they are a fit, if they both believe the same things in terms of the potential of the business. So we tend to be a little bit more low key about our approach than like what you'll see on a Shark Tank. The benefit of Shark Tank is it's made it just like more visible in terms of investing in new companies, which I very much appreciate. But we don't tend to recreate those situations. But we, through programs like our Glare and Gap program, we want to make sure that we are increasing the number of individual investors participating, and they can get involved on their own, or they can join organizations like seed funders, which like aggregates angel investors together. Florida Funders does that as well. So there's lots of mechanisms, and if you have anybody who's interested, I'm happy to direct them in the right place that matches what they want to do.
Yeah, good. I was thinking more of the financial component of it. I would hope that a lot of people are willing to share their knowledge and experience to help somebody else, pay it forward, if you will. I would hope that they would be, willing to do that to see somebody better themselves. So, any other questions from the room? Al, you good? He's good. Well, I really appreciate it, and I'll drop you an email. And see how we can help and how we as a chamber can, kind of share what you've kind of given us. I'll definitely share it on the website. But how we can, that sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved. We have a really diverse chamber membership. So
yeah.
Yes.
Grateful for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We should ask Ms. Shenoy to come back every year, because you'd like to see the report card.
Yeah.
Since I met with you the first time, just to see what's happened, what we've learned, what you've taught us. I think that would be really valuable to keep that up on some kind of periodic basis. I think that'd be good for everybody.
Absolutely. It holds me accountable too. And, and I welcome you all to come to our space whenever you want. If you're wanting to go somewhere, you're distanced and you're masked and you're safe, you come on over.
Road trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great. And what you said and what Al is saying is what the arena that you're in is ever changing. And I think even back when I was mayor, we had this discussion about some of the space that we have. And, you often wonder if the horse had already left the barn and we're a little too late to the game. And do we just use you as a resource as opposed to trying to create it ourselves? It seemed like there were a lot of, I guess, think tank, for lack of a better term, things starting up. But Embarc Collective definitely is the front runner for sure.
And build with us. That's the other thing is come if you have ideas. I am the first to tell you that we are very much a startup ourselves. And so when we see opportunity of things that further our mission, we want to pursue them. And so don't think of our offering as a finished product in any way. And if there's new ways to create collaboration and value on your end, I'd love to discuss it.
Awesome, great. Any other questions? If not, we'll wrap it up. I know some people got to go vote, and Al's got a city council meeting to get to tonight. Hopefully, it's going to be a short one.
Forget that.
Oh, eat. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and I'll be in touch on how we can work together even more. And I think you're right. Maybe we do make this an annual thing and kind of benchmark ourselves.
Fabulous. Well, thank you everyone for your time, and thanks everyone. Go vote. Make sure you do that.
Yeah, that's right. Go vote.
Thank you, Mr. Shenoy.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.